How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is a video that I've never made, so if you've been around for years and years, this will be a refreshing new video. And if you're new here, welcome. Welcome to all the new subscribers, and just thanks to everybody that comes here and hangs out. I'm stuck in the shop again today. It's super windy and just gross out. It's been raining and it's been raining 4 or 5 days a week for about 3 to 4 weeks. Not good if you're in construction like I am, but it'll clear up. Today's video, I'm going to use the cutaway. You guys know the handy dandy cutaway. This is a steel 028 Super that I cut in half years ago to show what's going on in a two-stroke. Today's video is going to answer a question that I get all the time. I'll mention on videos when I'm timing a saw that, hey, I'm going to do intake timing. I do the total opening on the intake. And because sometimes the intake will open and close at different spots. Now, friends, that gives people a headache. I get all kinds of lashings, tongue lashings, and nasty emails and comments over that all the time. I think it's funny. These are just chainsaws to me. None of this stuff really matters, does it? But people always say, what are you talking about? It is absolutely impossible, mechanically, physically, anything, for a port to open at different times because it's all moving the same. What are you talking about? And some people are friendly about it. Some people get downright nasty and just say, hey, you don't know what you're doing. You need to go back to the drawing board. So today's video, let's time this saw. First things first, we're going to zero it and let's see, okay, can a port open at different times, or do I need to go back to the drawing board, go back to grade 1 and really learn how engines work? Stay tuned.
She cuts, eh?
And here it is, the handy dandy cutaway. Okay, I'm showing you guys, I have a timing stop in here. It is screwed in. All a timing stop does is hits the top of the piston. Okay, and it should, if it's done properly, and it doesn't move, it should stop the piston. Look at where the crank lobe is. Okay, look where it lines up. It should stop the piston in the same spot in both directions, which is what this is doing. Now, I have the timing wheel on here. I'm going to do this in real time so that you guys can see there's no trickery. I'm doing this in the name of science, okay? So I have my piston stop in, I have my timing wheel. Now, all you're doing when you're zeroing, let's make sure this thing stays focused. All you're doing when you're zeroing your timing wheel is making sure that it's zeroed with the movement of the piston. Okay, so this says 57. Okay, 5, 6, 7 after top dead center. We want it to stop at 57 on the other side. If it doesn't, well, guess what? We'll get the wrong timing numbers and our ports will appear to open at different spots in each direction. So often the whole port opening at different spots is people thinking that my timing wheel is off. Now, it's rare that I do have a port that opens in different spots. Okay, now you guys can see 56 and a half. Okay, it's kind of in between the two. Now we'll go back the other way. And it's in between both. So we are zeroed. Okay, let's flip this thing around. You guys know that there's no trickery now. Now we know that this thing is perfectly zeroed. Okay. And there's going to be no confusion about this. So, the old saying or the old thing that people send me is, it is mechanically impossible for a piston to open and close at different times on any port. Yeah, I guess. Let's find out. Okay. Now, I'm just spinning this around to show you guys. This is a fully functional motor that's been cut in half. My wheel is zeroed. What we're going to do here is, okay, now that we've established that we're zeroed, let's open and close. Okay, let's open and close the intake. Right there. Now I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to take you guys out of the camera. We are at 73. Okay. 73 after top dead center. Now I'm going to put you guys back in the camera. Okay, and you guys can see it hasn't moved. Sorry, 73 before top dead center. Now let's close it. Make sure that we all agree that it's open and closed. Okay, right here. Okay, open and closed. $73. Okay, so this thing is legit. It opens and closes at the same spot. But hold on a minute. So we've established that this opens and closes at the same point, correct? Now I'm not going to change anything. We know this wheel is centered. And you got to ask yourself, Tin Man, what are you doing? What are you doing, Tin Man? Put this thing at bottom dead center right now. Okay. See what I did there, friends? I slipped the cylinder forward. Okay. Now, what that essentially did, it moved. Let's see if you guys can see in here. If you look at the space from here to there versus here to there, I moved the cylinder substantially forward. Okay? Now remember, we haven't touched the timing wheel at all. We haven't done anything. We slipped the cylinder forward. Okay, now let's go back to the intake port. Right here. Put the light on. There you guys go. Where does it open? Right there. Okay, we're real close. I'm trying to eyeball it exactly. Okay. Now, if we turn this around, I'm going to zoom you guys out here so you can actually see the wheel. Okay. What is that saying? Like 70, 69 and a half. Let's make sure we're getting the right number here. I'm just going to move it again. Right there. Okay, let's move it back. So 71. It did move a little bit when I turned it. Let's just go back to confirm. Okay, can we all agree it's just cracked right there? Okay. You can see the crack right there. It's just cracked. Okay, right there. Let's spin it real slow, real gentle. 71, okay? Now, Didn't it just open at 73? Kind of weird, isn't it? And I'm just going to leave this thing right here. Okay. Make sure it's focused right there. Cock it about the same time. 75.5, 76. We'll reconfirm that. I just moved it. Okay, right. Right. Right there. Okay, that's like exactly where it closes. 75, 76. Again, let's spin this thing around. Where does it open? Right about there. Okay. Spin this thing back around. 70, 71. Okay. It did move a little bit. It keeps moving. So here, let's go even further. Let's go more scientific here, because I don't want anybody to say that I'm just trying to skew the results. I'm just showing you guys what I know. On the surface, things seem very simple. Yes. Okay, I'm just poking this feeler gauge through here. I'm going to hold pressure on it. $61. Okay, I'm basically moving it. I'm sticking the feeler gauge in here and moving it till it stops. So we'll say 62. Okay. No, I will keep the feeler gauge in there and I will move it the other way. 66. Okay. Spin it back around. 62. What about the exhaust? Do you guys think the exhaust opens and closes different now? Let's find out. We can look at it right through the cylinder here, okay? You see the exhaust there? Okay, it just cracks there. Okay, spin it around. $103. Now let's see. See where it closes. Again, there's just a small crack in there. 103. 103. Wait a minute. How's that even possible? 103 and 103. But the intake's opening wonky. Let's try it again. 103. Now remember, friends, this is non-science science. I could use a piston stop. Okay, so we're right where we need to be. Okay, 103, 103. And we know it stops in the same place on the top because we used it with this, right? So now the question is, what's going on? Let's talk about this. Okay, now friends, I knew what the results of this would come up with because I've done this before many times. I've also learned from people who have been doing this a lot longer than me, people who are smarter than me. A lot of guys smarter than me. I'm just some guy horsing around in my shop. And when an old timer says, hey, you ever think about this or that? I listen to them. The guys that have taught me, they lead me to water, but they don't tell me how to drink. They let me find my own way. Now, friends, you have to think about this. Why does it not really affect the exhaust roof, but it affects the intake side? Okay, it opens late and it closes early, or it opens early and it closes late. The question is why. Well, let's get right down here. Let's see if I can get you guys lower. Okay, we're looking at the crank at approximately 90 degrees. And I left the timing wheel on here. Okay. Approximately 90 degrees by eye, it's 91. That's why you got to zero things out, because, well, your eye is always going to be off. Okay, so what's going on here? You guys might ask yourself. Well, let's look at the rod, okay? The rod is most affected, or has the hardest angle at 90 degrees, okay? At 90 degrees of timing, when the rod is sideways, it is at more of an angle or less of an angle. Now, modern manufacturing is very, very good, but sometimes your crank center line is off from your bore, okay? And when it does that, it changes the rod angle at the front and the back, because the cylinder is not perpendicular, okay? It is not perfectly centered with your crank center line. Now, how do you get there? Well, it could just be the holes are machined a little bit forward, or the bearing pockets are forward or backwards. It happens. Now, the rod angle or the crank center line is most affected at 90 degrees, because you can see that's where the rod changes angle. Okay, the lower in the stroke or the higher in the stroke, the less of the angle to the rod. And that's why your exhaust opening and closing are not affected, because not as affected, not enough that you can time it, because look, it's past 90 when it opens. It opens at about here and about there, okay? So your intake is open because look, your intake opens close to 90 degrees. The angle of the rod with this cylinder pushed as far forward as I can get it. I can't get it any farther forward because my cylinder will go past the inside of the case and my piston will catch. Okay. Now, I actually ground the holes a little bit and slipped this forward. And again, you guys can see the gap here is bigger than the gap there. Okay. Now, I only moved this thing forward about 1/8 of an inch, but you can see that 1/8 of an inch does change the timing. What? 6 degrees total difference of timing. Okay. It opened at what? 62 and it closed at 66. So there's 6 degrees of difference in your total opening. And there also is a difference in when it opens and closes. Okay. So, crank center line and piston bore can affect how your intake opens. Now, again, that is why I time my intakes by total opening. Just because it opens at 75 doesn't mean it closes at 75. And I can assume that I say have 150 degrees of total opening, when maybe I have 152 degrees of total opening. If I'm shooting for 158, okay, and I'm off by 2 degrees, I may be at 160. And if I say I run the saw and I go, oh, something's up, I need more intake timing. Well, what if I put another 2 degrees in and I end up with 164 total opening? Okay. Does this matter? Yes, it does matter. Are you going to ruin saws by not doing it total opening? No. Because you could time 50 saws and you might only have 1 or 2 that open and close different on the intake side. But those are the 2 that maybe you're going for the gold when you're really, really trying your best to, you're really trying your best to make the best numbers that you can. So again, to recap, how your cylinder bore relates to your crank center line affects how much the rod is at an angle at 90 degrees. Okay? And you can actually end up with more stroke or less stroke. Okay? So think about that. Your rod angle denotes how many degrees of of piston movement you're getting by how many degrees of crankshaft movement, okay? And that's why you can't simply say, well, I need 3 degrees on my exhaust port height, so I'm thinking I measured it at 15 degrees or 15 thou per degree up here, so I'm just gonna grind 3 times 15 would be 45 thousandths, and that'll get me my exhaust roof. Then you go to your intake side and you go, well, if my exhaust was there at 15 per degree, I'll just do the same thing. Well, often you don't get the same results on an intake because it's moving at a different speed. Remember that your piston speed changes by the crank rotation, okay? Based on more movement or less movement, just depending on where the rod's at and what angle the rod's at. Okay? So that's why I time my intakes at total opening. I hope that filled in the blanks for some of you guys. And again, anything I show you guys on the channel or anything I say I know to be true, it's because I've tested it. And this is one of those things that most people don't think of, but things can be out of whack and your crank center line can move in the case based on years of cases and manufacturing tolerances. Things can move. Your cylinder can be forward or backwards and your crank center line can move a little bit. So that's why it's really important to me to measure opening and closing of your ports. I still do it on the exhaust and transfers, but typically for me, I want to know total opening on the intake because I've been bit by sometimes the crank moves differently or the intake opens and closes at different points. So anyhow, friends, thanks for watching. Take her easy. And I hope this got your brain working because that's why I built this thing. I hope this helps you guys visualize what's going on. Remember, based on where your crank is, it'll change because your piston is here. It'll change the angle of your rod based on where your crank center line is in relation to your bore. Not everything is 100% lined up, especially at 90 degrees where the intake, that's the closest point to where the intake opens. So really think about this stuff and figure out how it works and how you can modify it, and you'll build better saws and make less mistakes. Anyhow, thanks for watching. Take her easy, and I'll see you guys in a couple days. Later.